Yes. Welcome to Money Making Conversation. I am your host, Rashawn McDonald. Each Money Making Conversation talk show is about entrepreneurship and entertainment. I provide the consumer and business owner access to celebrities, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industry decision makers. I recognize that we all have different definitions of success. For some, it's a sizable paycheck. Mine is helping people wake up and inspiring them to accomplish their goals and live their very best life. These are my passions, and that's what I'm going to do for you. I want you to stop tripping over small challenges and prepare to rise above bigger obstacles that life will present to you. The Money Making Conversation interviews provide relatable information to the listener about career and financial planning, entrepreneurship, motivation, leadership, overcoming the odds, and how to live a balanced life. My next guest is the CEO of Impact Strategies. She's also a CNN political commentator and currently serves on the board of the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, the Seattle University School of Law alumni, and Women in Entertainment Empowerment Network. She is on show to talk about her Own One with Angela podcast, which I love the name, Own One with Angela. And Black women being the Democrats' most reliable voting bloc, her Freedom Casual clothing line, and more importantly, her brand. Please welcome to Money Making Conversations, Angela Rye.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know I have limited time with you, so let's get straight to the questions. I'm sure you used to doing television live, so you're used to people coming at you real quick and knowing what's happening. You have a voice.
No problem.
You have a strong voice in the media landscape. Would you say you're a political influencer or a brand influencer?
I would say neither. I would say that I am an advocate, that I'm someone who fights diligently for macro and micro level change.
Right.
Growing up in the house with an activist. So I don't really see myself as an influencer. If people are influenced, great. But my primary goal in life is to make things better for human beings, for humankind. And I say that I focus most of that energy on making things better for Black folks.
Well, you're doing a great job, Angela. And I'm a marketing guru, as they say. I'm a brand specialist. And I have to say, you are an influencer, especially when I saw the video that was posted on the Washington Post that you did with Latasha Brown and Tiffany Cross and Alicia Garza and Sonny and your effort, Amanda Seals. In that article, it's talking about Biden still needs Black women. And here are three things he needs to do. Now, that article is an influencing article to me. And so that's why, and that's a good thing. Now, there's nothing negative about being an influencer as far as I'm concerned, because you build your brand to say that, and your voice, I think, stands out. And so when I have you on the show, because you are an influencer, you're a person who moves the needle, as they say. And so talk us about that. Tell us about that video that's on Washington Post, and talk us about why Black women are so important to the Biden efforts to get back into the White House, or to get in the White House. First, he was the vice president, but this time he'd like to go back as the president.
Yeah, I think it's really, really clear. And that's why, to me, it was so easy for me to write that piece with my sisters, some of whom, are on talk shows, and others who run various platforms or are activists in their own right. Right. And what is very clear is that, election after election, Black women, Black people really do so much to ensure that Democrats are in a position of power, that, they win. And so often our thanks is that they are there, but our thanks is not in them meeting agenda items that would be required of any other voter who knows that their vote is worthy of something. As an attorney, you learn that in a contract, there is a bargained for exchange.
Absolutely.
And a bargain for exchange means that I will give you something, but in return, I get something. And we're telling them the things that we need in return. Part of what is unfortunate for this particular campaign is that it comes years and years and generations after this bargained for exchange hasn't really been bargained for. And in fact, there hasn't been an exchange at all. There's just been a repeated gift, a gifting of our voting power. Right. And it hasn't been rewarded. And so we're saying it's time out for that. And it has to be right now. I think that what's happened with coronavirus has certainly shined a bright light on the inequities that exist in this country. And it has made us say, no more. It's time for something very different to happen. And that's sheerly because of our need to survive and to thrive in this country.
And which I totally agree. I'm 100% on pace with you with that. Now, there are three things he needs to do for Black women in particular, Black people overall. But let's talk about this article is about Black women. And the first was America needs a Black woman as vice president. Mm-hmm. That was your first comment. Do you have a person that at least some options you'd like to recommend?
I actually think that going into who the options are is a distraction right now. Okay. Because the principle is in just getting them to agree that we are worthy of that, right? That we are worthy of a VP that looks just like us, who is representing our best interests. It's not that any Black woman would do, right? No, we know. But it is that there are an abundance of qualified Black women to choose from. And so you don't get to say this time that you don't have anybody who's qualified. You don't get to say this time that you don't have anyone who's experienced. That is not true. And so that's what we wanted to focus on instead of listing and naming names. Awesome.
And the other two was America needs a Black female Supreme Court justice. Your comments.
Yes. And we tied that specifically to what happened with Clarence Thomas's confirmation hearing.
And Anita Hill.
This was supposed to be, the man who was replacing and fulfilling the legacy of Thurgood Marshall. And instead he's, for lack of a better term, I'll say poo-pooed on it. Mm-hmm. So I don't cuss on your show. And I think the other thing that we have is, Anita Hill. And it's not just that Anita Hill was shamed before the Judiciary Committee that Joe Biden chaired, but she also got a half-hearted apology only after he announced his campaign for running for president this time. So we certainly owe Anita Hill. And I got to be honest with you and say, even though I'm not naming names, it sure would be poetic justice to have Anita Hill on that bench. I don't know that she would want it, but wow, that would be something. That
would be awesome. Now, the third one, which I think was not so much driven by female, but just a Black agenda, period, a comprehensive Black agenda that's tied to the physical violence that's being just we're sleeping in our bedrooms and police officers just coming in and you're jogging down the street and people just randomly just shooting you. You're getting choked out in New York. It's just so in the backyard of in Sacramento getting shot 100 times. It's just so many rotating things. And I tell you, as a Black man, I do think about that. I do have concerns. I do have concerns when I walk around with a mask on because of the pandemic times that we live in. Can somebody be stupid that day and want to question why I have a mask on when everybody else has a mask on? And so let's talk about that, the comprehensive Black agenda.
Yeah, and I think that this part is really straightforward too. Regardless of who is in power, Black people have some certain needs based on our historic positioning in this country that dates back to 400 plus years of institutional of slavery. That goes to Jim Crow, that goes to redlining, that goes to mass incarceration. There are some systemic wrongs that have uniquely taken place for Black people that need to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed whether there is a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, a Tea Party, whoever it is in the position of power. This needs to be addressed. And I would argue at every level, Rashawn. It needs to be at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, I'm talking at the local level. I'm just going to Kroger's and I'm worried. Okay?
Yes, I understand. And I'm just agreeing with you that, that is indeed the case, that we have to start saying, hey, and this isn't just about racial injustice through a societal or a social lens, or through, the lens of a criminal justice reform plan. It is also about our economic empowerment, our economic opportunity. My dad has called for years for a specific set aside and designation for people who are the descendants of the United States enslaved. He says we should not say slaves anymore. It should be enslaved because it puts the onus on the slave holder to say enslaved.
Right.
And so That is one of the things that should be done. There should be a robust agency like the Minority Business Development Agency that specifically addresses the needs of Black business. So there's so many things that need to be addressed. Livable wage. Access to healthcare or, free healthcare, Medicare for all would certainly help Black people. And so often we shy away from what is deemed as progressive. It's called socialist policy. Right. And that is because people don't want to have to repay the debts that are owed to Black people. But those are the things that would help us. Which is amazing.
Before we wrap up here, how were the individuals in the video that I saw, and anybody can go on the Washington Post and you can see it yourself. In fact, I'm going to post it on my social media tonight so they can see it on my Facebook and see exactly what the impact of what you guys are trying to communicate. Who did somebody call somebody? Somebody called another person? How did all of them get on the video and how was it shot?
Well, a conversation was first held around the politics of coronavirus with a group of Black women. We held Black women speak. And from that, just grew this sisterhood, and it was expanded to include two women in the field who are doing the work every day, and that is Latasha Brown, who runs Black Voters Matter, and frankly helped to secure the victory for Doug Jones in that Senate seat in Alabama, and then also Alicia Garza, who we referred to in the article for Black Futures Lab. They developed this agenda, Rashawn, that was built upon surveying 30,000 Black people all over the country. It's the largest survey of Black people in 155 years. And that is where the policy recommendations come from in that agenda. And we say, hey, this is a good place to start. Your Lift Every Voice agenda is not sufficient. It does not even scratch the surface on what we need as Black people. But Alicia Garza's plan does. And so we ask them to participate in this with us because we know that their voices are powerful. We know they represent the interests of the culture from a grassroots and an organizing standpoint, and certainly from an advocacy perspective.
Well, it's amazing. I'm talking to Angela Rye. She's the CEO of Impact Strategies. You catch her on CNN all the time. I know I do. And she's, on the boards of Congressional Black Caucus. Angela, let's switch a little gears here. You on my show. It's a podcast, syndicated radio show. And you're in the podcast world now. On One with Angela. Tell us about that. Is it a political show? Is it an entrepreneurial show? Is it a female-oriented show? What is On One with Angela?
On One with Angela Rye is a podcast.
First of all, I love the name. I told you earlier in my intro. I love that name. It's just a natural play, like you on one, like you got an attitude. I just love that. On One with Angela. Okay.
And it is designed to talk about what's happening in the culture, what's happening in our communities, what's going on from a spiritual standpoint, emotional standpoint, and what's happening in politics. And so it's a place where I interview guests. We've been doing a masterclass series since the coronavirus kind of quarantine and safer in place began, talking to some of the biggest stars, people who I'm fortunate to have relationship with and close to and are my friends, or we're a call away, like Miss Patti LaBelle, who did a cooking session with me, Chris Paul, who did a dribble clinic with me. We have a podcast coming up with Method Man, who is teaching me how to freestyle. That's funny. I'm learning these different crafts. It was super fun. From these people who are amazing in their work. And I wanted the viewing audience to learn with me or to laugh at me because I might not be as good as they hope. I think I did all right on the cooking one. The rest of these all need work.
Oh, how about the dribble? So you failed on the dribble? Dribbling?
Man, Chris Paul came on my Instagram live after and told me that I was cut. I said, Coach, I didn't even make it to the first practice. He said, it's too bad.
You mentioned several times about the pandemic period that we're in, and it's amazing. I've been invited on a lot of shows, and I've somewhat become a pandemic expert, especially when I look at the plight of the people of color, and especially African Americans. What bothers you the most? How the media is kind of like suppressed it, and really it had one little moment in the sun, and then it like hit the back burner after that because you can't grab any more stats. I can't find them about how, and I have to do deep dive research to find out a breakdown on how blacks are still being overtly affected by the COVID-19 virus. Tell us your impact on you, your feelings on that.
Well, what I think is so fascinating about this is an opportunity for us to lift up another Black woman, Ayanna Pressley, who is a first-term congresswoman from Massachusetts,
right,
who took it upon herself to say, I need to know how Black people are being impacted by this virus. And so you're going to pull data that shows me what that adverse impact and that disproportionate impact is. Mm-hmm. And so thanks to Ayanna, we will see those numbers. They will not be able to hide. And I think it's really important for us to understand the importance of having advocates both in the streets and in the halls of Congress. And she's one in the halls of Congress who's doing that work. And it's so important that we continue to lift that up. I think the other things that we have to see are the Ayannas that are making that same case on the state level, right? So we understand how we're faring in the states. It was discussed on CNN last night, actually, that Black people currently, of course, we make up 12% of the overall demographics in this country, but we make up more than 27% of the COVID cases. Mm-hmm. 27%. That is large, and it's, of course, disproportionate. We have a lot of the underlying conditions, which means we are putting ourselves in harm's way, and we're overwhelmingly essential workers. Right.
Absolutely.
And for whatever reason, they still have not bridged that gap between what it means to be an essential worker and an essential life. You cannot do that work if you're not surviving.
Because just to give some more stats to that, with people hearing, I was telling numbers don't lie. In Chicago, 23% of the residents are Black, but 58% of the COVID-19 deaths are Blacks. 7 out of 10 COVID deaths in New Orleans, in the state of Louisiana, have been Black. 80%. When that report came out in April, people can understand now, once you read that report, why Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom was upset. When you see that 80% of the hospitalized COVID-19 patients in Georgia were Black, and the numbers go on and on. That came out, and when Georgia opened up, he opened Georgia 3 days before that CDC report came out. So that was a strategy all along, that it didn't matter about Black people. I'm gonna move forward. Mm-hmm. I have no plan to save Black people. I have no plan to help out Black people. It's about me and my agenda. And that's really what disturbs me the most, is that when I hear about what you did in the Washington Post and you talk about an agenda, that's what we're saying. If we're going to give up our vote, get something back this time. In writing. And otherwise, you're just going to sit back and they're going to go through the motions again and again, another 4 years, and they're going to come back to us with the same stale, we need your plan, and we're going to deliver, because the other option doesn't even have an option for us. It doesn't even exist. And so I really appreciate your honesty when you talk about these things. But before we wrap, I saw Freedom t-shirt, or Freedom hoodies.
Yeah, Freedom looks good on you.
For women. Talk to us about that before you get out of here, because I really appreciate a person who's branding. That's what we talk about, branding your message, branding your reputation, branding your tone. Talk about the Freedom line.
So, the overall line, I guess, is just my stuff, but I have this affinity to t-shirts and apparel that have affirmations on them. Okay. My good friend B. Mike out of New Orleans has a shirt that says, I am my ancestors' wildest dream. And I feel like I want people to know how I feel about myself by what I'm wearing. And I want to remind myself how I feel about myself. So one journey that I've been on for some time is just freedom, and what does it really mean, and how do you really tap into and boldly walk in your freedom and in liberation. And so the shirt, this thing that just always stood out to me is freedom looks better on you than else, right? That's certainly better than bondage. So freedom looks good on you is that affirmation, and a lot of people agree with it. I have another shirt that we're going to do a re-release for that says, we built this joint for free. And I think that the for free part is not something that we are necessarily proud of, but we're proud of the fact that we built something with a strong foundation that now we need to be richly rewarded for.
Right.
So I just think it's about statements of facts, and I love affirmations, and I support a bunch of folks who have the same thing. My friend Alicia Garza, who we just talked about, has a sweatshirt that says "Powerful Black Voter," and I love that because it reminds me of the, not just of the power of just the vote, but the power we have politically, especially when we exercise it. So,
well, great. I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to tell you this. I'm going to post that video on my Facebook every Friday. I have at 9 a.m. I send a newsletter out to 90,000 of my fans, my loyal fans. I'm going to put your freedom T-shirts in there if you don't mind.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
I'm going to put it. So if you notice a little bump, that's just Rushion McDonald showing his love to Angela Rye. Okay. And you be safe. And I appreciate you. Anytime you want to come on my show, your voice is welcomed here. Money Making Conversations is a home for entrepreneurs and entertainers, as well as people who want to change the world. And my friend, you are an influencer in so many ways. And don't stop. Okay.
Thank you so much for the support. I deeply appreciate it. Thank you all for all you do to lift up Black business and to encourage entrepreneurs on your show. Thank you. And
we won't lose because we're doing it together. Thank you.
That's exactly right.
If you want to hear more Money Making Conversations interviews, go to moneymakingconversation.com. I'm Rushion McDonald. I'm your host.